Okay, so my name is Dan Mayo, by the way. The proposed regulations have been out for about 5 months now. There have been a lot of industry events surrounding the actual rules. We had some great seminars here yesterday. This panel, too, is we'll talk about some of the individual rules that apply. So I thought I would focus on the customer service aspect here and some opportunities and some challenges that we might want to consider, and then weave some of the rules into the discussion as we talk about it. So starting out with the distribution channel impact, again, the relationships and interactions will differ depending on the channel. So just loosely, we broke it out into retail and registered investment advisors. So on the retail side, we're talking about managing customer expectations. And here I think the key is to anticipate the concerns that the customers will have, because not all customers are created equal. I think the key is to get in front of them, start the dialogue and the explanation of what's about to come and what the rules are. For example, explaining the difference between a covered security and non-covered security, the lot relief methods that are available, how they go about selecting them. And then we talk about soliciting preferred cost basis methodologies. Here I think that the key is to spend time crafting the appropriate message so that to minimize the amount of questions that come back from the clients, because there are some brokers, for example, when an issue comes up, they can anticipate with some kind of statistical regularity how many calls are going to receive from clients on the issue. And I think if the message is crafted properly, it's given an appropriate number of times and through the right mediums and a method they're used to seeing, I think it will minimize the questions and therefore cost to the company in explaining the rules to the clients. The third bullet here is documenting SCorps. And I think, we should mention the rules for SCorps, they become reportable in 2012. The IRS is mentioned in the preamble to proposed regulations that it's considering issuing a revised W-9, which would have a box or some kind of indication that companies can indicate whether a C-Corp or an S-Corp. But that they didn't mandate companies reissuing or resoliciting W-9s from all their clients, because they thought that was just one way the companies could obtain the information, that there are other methods out there. But I think the key is that the eyeball test has been eliminated, that a company can no longer rely on the name of the institution to determine if it's an exempt recipient, and that the default under the proposed regulations, if the company does not know that it's a C-Corp or an S-Corp, then it's reportable. So they'll have to report, and also if it's an undocumented C-Corp, it could be subject to backup withholding. Turning to registered investment advisors, they have many of the similar opportunities and challenges related with the retail channel. But just two I thought to mention were the migration of their advisors' client data onto the broker's platform, and then coordinating the reporting. As many of you know, the brokers oftentimes have their own gain loss reports and their own customer data. So I think the brokers and the investment community should think about methods of educating the advisors about the rules, about their policies regarding acceptance of client data for non-covered securities. Then it's an operational matter of getting the systems to interact and letting the advisors know that their daily, weekly, monthly downloads of data, whatever it is, will start including cost basis information at the lot level. And I think the challenge here might be to coordinate the data to ensure that the numbers reported on the gain loss reports of the registered advisors are consistent and coordinate with what's put on the 1099. We talk about customer mobility challenges. This essentially refers to the transfer statement requirement. And recall that anytime a stock moves in connection with custody of a security is transferred in connection with a non-sale transaction, the transferring broker has an obligation to provide a transfer statement within 15 days of the transfer. One of the key challenges here is data storage. And here, even if the number of transfer statements is not great in absolute terms, the amount of data that might be transmitted under these statements could be huge. And the volume of data will require a tremendous storage capability, especially given that the data is required to be kept until securities are sold, and even later, because unfortunately under the proposed regulations, there's no cutoff date that an applicable person under the regs has in which they could stop amending the transfer statements. So theoretically, under the proposed regulations, if a broker, say, transfer securities in a non-sale transaction, provides a transfer statement to the receiving broker, and 3 years later, they learn additional information that something was incorrect, they have a duty to amend that transfer statement. And I know SIFMA was very active in lobbying this point, trying to get a cutoff date. But in the absence of that, there seems to be an unlimited obligation to store the data. On the transfer requirement itself, this is a new requirement. Companies, I think the key here is companies need the ability to send and receive transfer statements and all the information that's required at the lot level on these statements. And also that they have the ability to do it in all formats, whether it's on Seabreeze, which is the CBRS I mentioned in the third bullet, or fax or spreadsheets. And that's something companies need to consider if we're in a manual world, because Seabreeze is not up and running, and/or the transfer statement requirement's not delayed by a year. Again, two things SIFMA has been lobbying for pretty effectively, I think. There needs to be an ability to handle the manual world, and obviously very labor intensive, not the ideal scenario for the community, but something that might want to plan for that eventuality. In terms of Seabreeze, I think someone will touch on that coming up. That's the DTC system that's currently used by banks and brokers, by participating banks and brokers. There's talk about extending, DTCC is talking about extending the beyond the traditional brokerage community to mutual funds and others. So here I think mutual funds might want to stay involved in the process, and by staying involved and watching what's happening, they perhaps can have influence on the types of data fields that will be maintained, and if there's anything particular to them that they want to think about. In terms of streamlining customer interactions, I think refreshing standing order elections with the transferee broker. Again, this is a communications challenge. I think the thing to consider here is that the receiving broker should have a system to tell the new client that they're receiving that their standing orders with the old broker are no longer effective, and the client needs to come up with new standing orders with the broker if that's something they want to maintain. Facilitating specific identification of transferred securities. Here it's again a communications issue, explaining the options and how it can be done, and then the broker confirmation requirement. And it's something I'll talk about in a few minutes. Finally on the slide here we have managing the policy regarding acceptance of customer information. Here I think the institutions need to decide on a policy whether they will accept client data to put on 1099s, and then if so, they need to explain it to clients and explain that different brokers may have different policies, and each company needs to decide how they want to proceed and if they'll accept such data. On the opportunities for client education,